Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back. In today's video we are going to be creating a card with the rolled roses dies. These are mini rolled roses and there is 2 included in this set, so you can get 2 different sizes. And we're going to incorporate them into our card design to kind of mix some stamping with some felt and dimension. So I've picked out some products that I want to use on the card design. So I have the Fab Foliage dies, which we're going to use to cut out some felt. I also have the Bold Blossom stamp set to do the stamping, and I have the inside and out stitched circle stacks, which is what I'm going to use to create the wreath shape. So I'm going to first create a template with it so I know exactly where I need to stamp the wreath on my panel, and then we're actually going to use it to die cut the center of the wreath once we have it completely finished. So the panel of cardstock I have here is 4 inches square, and I'm just going to pick out the circle that I think is going to work here and just place it on top to get sizing and make sure that it's going to be not too big or too small. And once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to take it off screen and I'm going to die cut it into another panel that's exactly the same size. And this is so I can use this as a template to trace that circle onto my panel so I have it positioned perfectly in the center of this square. So I'm just going to very lightly trace around the inside area of this template to draw my circle, and I'm going to use this for 2 reasons. The first is so I know exactly where I want to stamp to create the wreath, and then once I'm done the stamping, it's also going to show me where I need to die cut that same circle from this panel. So now I need to create my rolled roses, so I have some different colors of felt here. I have gravel gray, summer splash, and ripe raspberry, and I die cut one of the rolled roses out of each of these pieces of felt. Now I decided to keep my flowers the exact same size, so I used the smaller one to die cut it, just mainly because this is a smaller size card and I'm going to incorporate it into a stamp design, so I didn't want the flowers to be too big. So I did die cut them all, and now I'm going to turn them into actual flowers. So there's 2 ways you can do this. You can just roll them with your fingers and you just start at the smallest end and you work your way all the way down the rows until you have it completely rolled. Or you can use tweezers, which I find to be a lot easier, especially these type of tweezers which clamp closed on their own, so you don't actually have to hold them closed. If you just kind of put them on the end of that rolled rose, you can very carefully just kind of roll it onto itself until you have the entire flower rolled. Now once you have the rose fully rolled, you are going to need to use some type of an adhesive to adhere it together so that it stays together as a flower. I like to use hot glue just because it dries very quickly and I know it's going to hold really well, but you could definitely use a fabric glue or any other type of glue that you prefer. And you just want to add it to the bottom of that flower and then press up on the little piece that's left over after you're done rolling. And that is going to fully adhere that together and hold all of the layers of that rolled rose on the bottom of the flower there. So I'm just going to repeat the process now with the other 2 colors of felt. So I have my pink here and I'm just once again using those tweezers to hold on to that flower. And I do have this sped up a little bit. I don't quite move that quickly, but I just rolled that up once again and then used my hot glue to securely attach the bottom piece to the bottom of the flower. I repeated the same process for the summer splash flower, and now we have 3 of our rolled roses ready to go that are going to go on our finished wreath. So now that I have those assembled, I can set them aside now because I don't really need them quite yet. I'm going to get the wreath put together and then we'll add these flowers onto it once we're finished. So to create the wreath, I want to have a little bit of felt greenery in addition to the stamping. So I'm going to take the Fab Foliage dies and go ahead and die cut that felt right now so that I have all of the felt pieces ready to go. So those are now all cut off screen and you'll see them when we start to assemble the finished wreath. Okay, so now I have my panel there once again, and this is the panel that has that drawn circle on it. And I've put it into my MISTI so that I can do any double stamping that I need to do. And it's just really easy to be able to turn my panel in the MISTI to create the wreath. So I'm going to start off with this smaller flower here, and I'm using some ripe raspberry ink. And I'm just going to position the flower onto that circle, and I'm going to rotate this panel 4 times in my MISTI. And that's just going to kind of keep that flower image in the same area on that circle on all 4 sides of this panel that we've created. And I do have the camera sped up because I'm going to quickly go through the creation of the wreath. So I'm doing the same thing once again with another flower image and a different color of ink. And then I realized I needed some smaller leaves, so I brought in my Bold Bloom stamp set and I pulled out a leaf design from there that I'm going to add some green to the wreath now. So I have some Limelight ink and I'm just quickly going around and stamping that onto the panel as well. And you can see here I'm just repeating that same process. I'm just kind of turning my panel in my MISTI as I go. Now when you rotate your panel and stamp it like I was here, you kind of get a square design rather than an actual circle wreath. But what I'm doing now is I'm taking some smaller images. I have some really tiny flowers, some polka dots, and some little dot clusters. And I'm stamping those into the wreath with various colors of ink, and I'm just using my acrylic block. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to fill in the areas in between the main stamping that we did, and it's going to help me to turn this into a circle. So you can see now I have all of that stamping done, and rather than having that square shape, we now have a really nice round circle wreath. So now I can start to assemble the different pieces onto the wreath to decide where I want all of my felt pieces to go. So I kind of have all of the greenery there beside me, and I'm just using my scissors to trim the pieces down as I kind of place them onto the wreath, mainly because I want most of them to tuck underneath of the flowers, and a lot of them were a little bit too long. So this cuts really easily, and then you can just tuck them nicely underneath the felt flowers. So I positioned all the greenery, I positioned the felt flowers over top, and figured out exactly how I wanted to put everything. And then I removed the flowers so I could actually adhere the felt greenery to the wreath. So for this, I'm just using some Nouveau glue. This is just a white glue, and I'm just putting a little bit of a dot on each of the leaves, and that is going to hold this perfectly in place. And I love the final result of having that great stamp detail, those really bright pinks and the blue colors, and then having the felt greenery kind of going over top. And I like that because we have so much stamping and the felt that we've really filled in that wreath and made it look really nice and full. So now I want to die cut the center of the wreath so that I can create some dimension with the outer layer of this once I have a die cut. So it is a little bit scary to cut through all of that stamping and the felt that we've added there, but because I had that pencil line and I knew exactly where that circle was on that panel, it allowed me to very easily line up the circle and cut through the center with no problem. So now I'm going to just use this hug sentiment from this stamp set here, and it's actually part of a full sentiment that says sending hugs, and I just cut that apart so I could just have the hugs word since it's going to fit really nicely in the center of my wreath. I did use my MISTI to stamp the sentiment, so I just placed the panel with the circle in the center right into my MISTI, and then I stamped that out, and luckily I did just because I ended up having to stamp it twice because I didn't get a very good impression that first time. So the MISTI definitely saved this little card here that we have put so much work into. And now I can start to assemble it into a card. So I have a square card base that measures 4 1/4 inches, and it is a raspberry card base. And I'm just holding the outer portion of this wreath panel in place so that I can adhere the center directly onto the card base. I want to have dimension on this, but I want it to be on the outside of the panel. So I want the outside to be a little bit raised off of the card, but the inside to be completely flush with the card base. So I just kind of positioned that in place. I added foam adhesive to the outer portion, and now I'm going to put this onto the card base and line it up over top of that circle that we've already adhered onto the card. I just really love the added dimension and the separation of the wreath, but the continuation of the images from the outer to the inside of that circle. And now that we have that done, we can go ahead and add our felt flowers. So for these here, I'm going to have them kind of half on the outer panel and half on the inside panel. So I'm just adding a tiny piece of foam adhesive on the inside portion of that circle where the flower is going to overlap, and that's just going to give it some added support since it will kind of lean into the inside area of that circle if we don't have that foam adhesive. So I'm going to do that for all 3 of the flowers and then use that same Nouveau glue on the bottom of the flower and adhere it directly onto the card. And once that glue dries, those flowers are definitely not going to go anywhere. They're going to stay fully adhered to the card. So the last thing I want to do now to finish off my wreath is just add some crystal gems. So I have a bunch of clear gems that I have scattered around the wreath and kind of filled in any areas that I felt were a little bit blank or needed a little bit more added to them once I had everything else fully adhered. So now we have a beautiful colorful wreath design that we've created not only with stamping but also with some felt for the leaves and those beautiful dimensional rolled roses. Now this is definitely a more dimensional card, so it will be a little bit more difficult to mail, but it definitely works for a card that you are going to hand deliver. I hope you enjoyed today's video and got some ideas for using our mini rolled roses dynamics. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in another video soon.